Because without further ado, it's going to happen. It's happening now, in fact, and we can't stop it. Welcome, everybody,
It's all I
to
wanted.
Skeptical Eye for the Paranormal Guys, TLDR. TLDR. You want to say that 5 times fast? TLDR.
TLDR, 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 TLDR.
Well, that was 6. We got an extra one in there. So let me just bring this back to, the beginning. We're going to be talking or discussing the book Encounters in the Pleiades, an inside look at UFOs by Preston B Nichols.
Oh boy, tell me about the alien koala.
Well, I don't even know about the alien koala yet. So I'm just going to read you a little segment from the beginning of the book. I'm guessing written by Preston B Nichols himself, and then I'll get into a little bit of who Preston B Nichols is, or who I think he is, and such. No constellation in the night sky has rivaled the Pleiades for its impact upon the mind of man. Artists, poets, scientists, mythographers, and poets alike, or prophets alike, have not only cited the Pleiades as inspiration to their work, but as a key to understanding mankind and his/her relationship with the creative principles of existence. This book is an incredible story of a man who found himself taken to the Pleiades, where he was examined and instructed by intelligent life forms who appeared human. The Pleiadians proceeded to give him an education and indoctrination that would enable him to regain his health and attain an unparalleled understanding of electromagnetic science and its role in UFO technology.
Did you steal that from a library?
I wouldn't say steal. I would say checked out. Anyhow,
New Mexico would have that in the system.
Encounters in the Pleiades blends the history of physics and ufology with the personal experience of Preston Nichols and gives unprecedented insight into the technology of flying saucers and their accompanying phenomenon. Never before has a complex subject of UFOs been explained in such a simple language that will be appreciated by scientists and understood by the layman.
That's me.
I know, me too, apparently.
Both the chords, kind of.
So that's the book behind me. That's Encounters in the Pleiades.
Oh,
anyway,
you can't see the koala, the only important part.
Yeah, it's not that. See, that's why I wanted it to be the whole. Oh, actually, look. There. Green screen. There you go.
My immersion is broken.
Yeah, it's seeing through the 5th wall or whatever. Okay, but so I picked up this book. Apparently, this book is one in a big series of ones that this guy has done. Have you ever heard of the Montauk Project?
I believe you've mentioned it to me previously.
Well, let's just, for all those who don't know what the Montauk Project, I actually don't fully know what the Montauk Project is. It has something to do with time and stuff, but it's actually one of the things that Stranger Things kind of took its inspiration from that. So I don't actually know what the Montauk Project is, but Preston B Nichols is the guy who wrote this. And in a little bit, you'll actually get to see a couple pictures of Preston B Nichols and why it's so funny that he said that he was educated and indoctrinated in a way to regain his health and attain an unparalleled understanding of electromagnetic science. Because he does not look super healthy when you look at him, personally. So, with that aside,
he's been huffing magnets.
From what I know about Preston B Nichols, he's basically an expert in radio technology. Can you still hear me from this distance?
Yes. Hello, paranormal people. We're back again. One half of the squad. Who knows where the others are? They're lost in the Pleiades at this point.
Oop.
Whoop. Oh, is this him?
That's Preston B Nichols.
I see those radio waves weren't kind to his chin.
No, or his yellow skin tone. I think that's just bad picture because it's like there's
He's
only
a Simpson.
5 pictures of him anyway. So we're gonna delve into this book, The Encounters in the Pleiades, an inside look into UFOs.
Delve.
So what is the Pleiades? Well, that's known as the 7 Sisters, the constellation. Not even the constellation. a grouping of stars that you may have seen in that small video that is behind me.
That you may have seen in that sky thing you look at every once in a while.
But so we're going to go delve into chapter 1, and that is the highlights, which is called Mysterious Flying Crafts and the General UFO History. So we get basically right into the history of UFOs with this gentleman. Allow me to read. Mysterious flying crafts are mentioned throughout UFOs history, in old Sanskrit manuscripts as well as in the Bible. Example, the Vamata flying machines, Ezekiel's winged fire chariot, etc. Austin, are you familiar with any of those?
Well, the second one doesn't sound like an unidentified flying object. They knew it was a fire chariot.
Not gonna lie, it is a winged chariot, which is funny because why would you need wings if you have a UFO or a flying saucer? To quote, there is nothing new to the experience of mankind, but they are nothing new to the experience of man. They are nothing new to the experience of mankind, but an understanding as regarding their precise nature certainly needs to be improved upon. This is the premise of this book. Can't help it. There's Preston B Nichols again.
Yeah, he's not looking like he solved the health issues he was talking about with magnetism right now.
No, he does not. Unfortunately,
he's looking like he might have diabetes.
I think that he was the original. What's that guy's name?
Wilford Brimley.
Yeah, that one. He's somehow they're related. I don't know.
I think Brimley might be older than and dead.
But anyway, so the premise of this book is obviously to improve upon the understanding of UFOs, as stated by Mr. Nichols here. So in this section, he details a crash course in American ufology history, from the early sightings during the 1930s while testing military radar to the infamous Roswell crash of 1947. Modern rumors of the UFO crashes started roughly in 1936 and continued right through World War II until the first documented crash in obviously 1947 with Roswell. How do you feel about that?
I mean, seems like an oversight on the aliens.
Yeah, see,
we can counter every gravitational well and variation between our planet and here, but goddamn, that Earth gravity is some wacky shit.
Well, that is kind of something that I've always wondered upon when they were like, yeah, because I've heard a lot of different things, some being where they're like, oh, our radar was able to screw them up. And then lots of other crazy theories, like the Russians put, genetically modified children in there and then somehow got it across our borders and then they crashed something crazy technology. Have you ever
the most
heard of
prepared Air Force group ever flying into the middle of nowhere and then managing to slip, fall, and crash in the back alleys of the universe,
Well, in New Mexico of all places, which I always was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But a lot of people speculate because that's military installations and such. Have you read anything by Annie Jacobson?
Doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head.
So she was the one who recently wrote a book called like Area 51 and all. It was a fluff piece that the government wanted to put out to make everybody kind of calm down about the whole Area 51 thing. And her whole deal was that basically she was talking about how Area 51 was a big proponent in stealth technology and
which is kind of
basically
Black
Project Aviation. So like the U2 development.
Oh man, I was super into the quote unquote Aurora for ages, but
yeah. Or this SR-71 Blackbird, that it's all the B-2 bomber, that sort of thing was what she was kind of trying to do.
That was Yonkers.
What?
No, nothing. Keep going. Sorry.
Well,
plain stuff.
That was what she was, going on about, was that the point of her book was to be like, oh, Area 51's nothing more than, everybody's just trying to keep all the government stealth planes secret, And then at the end of the book, she kind of goes into how, do you remember the War of the Worlds, Austin? The War of the Worlds reading that made people on the East Coast apparently freak out?
I have that on vinyl.
Well, apparently the radio broadcast made people go crazy.
It's good. We'll listen to it sometime.
We should. But during that, there was a whole hysteria that broke out where people were like, oh no, aliens are actually crash landing in the middle of whatever. And she was saying that the Russians wanted to do a psyops on us. So they basically genetically altered children, stuffed them into some kind of UFO type craft that they had designed, and then sent it all the way to crash land in fucking New
This one's
Mexico.
0 to 100% Soviet real fast.
I know. Well, trust me, I read this book like 5 years ago. And I was like, at the time, I was like, oh, I want to know the secrets of, of course, I didn't think that they were actually going to discuss that. And 99% of the book is literally just about the black projects and all that stuff and why it was kept secret. And
Now I want to write a book about the Soviet super children that got shoved in a UFO and crashed like Balloon Kid.
Well, that part I think is complete bullshit. And I think that was fed to her by the powers that be, because
that does sound like an FBI story. That's pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we'll get past that, Okay, so 1947 happened, whatever. Since that crash, many have begun to occur at the rate of one every 3 to 4 months. This is directly from the book. After that period,
when was this written?
This book. This probably a while back, like
so one every 3 to 4 months since 1940 something.
Mm-hmm. So this book was copywritten in 1996. He has many more that I think went back to the
nearly
early 90s.
50 years with minimum 3 crashes per year. So it's 150 crashes. I didn't hear about a lot of those.
That's the crashes. I don't even think that's supposedly just the crashes. Oh, no. Yeah, it is a crashes. Sorry. I apologize. So this is why the Air Force started the Project Blue Book, and which was at least a 2-layer project. The first was to discover all info concerning UFO sightings and crashes. The second priority was to cover up the UFOs to keep it out of the hands of our enemies. I just want to ask
damn commies.
Well, right. And I just wanted to know, like, okay, so if let's just say.
Had the Soviet Union fully collapsed by 96? It had, right?
Yeah.
Like 89, 90s
yeah,
when it was definitely fully dissolved. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this is obviously written pre or post all of that. The real question, though, is about Preston B Nichols and his story regarding that. But I just want to know, so let's just say, hypothetically, that you believed that aliens were coming to this planet, right? Because as we all know, you don't. But if that was the case, would you think that the government would want to cover up the fact that they exist because they don't want this technology being, sought after by the Russians or the Chinese or whoever, are enemies of the state, so to speak?
I would assume it would be because they don't want us to acknowledge there are other species. That would imply that we aren't the greatest power or the greatest mind, and it'd be harder to keep the same level of control and influence they currently have. So the people in power would be like, hey, you get out of here with your interspace travel, mister.
I agree, actually. Trying to keep a hold of, especially like America at that time in the 40s was a highly Christian.
We thought we were the top of the goddamn world. We had nuclear technology. We'd just beaten them damn Nazis.
Yeah. It would be, what would you say, paradigm breaking? But
it would paradigm altering at the very least. I don't know if it'd break anything, but it would shift it to where the acknowledgement of power would be that instead of us being the top dogs, it would be proven that we're just something while the top dogs are out there occasionally crashing into our deserts and freaking out our farmers.
And how could we possibly be God's creation if God's created something even crazier with
don't piss off the Christians, don't piss off the religious people, good Lord.
And see, that's why I feel like this entire subject is so, like, even if you knew the truth or there was truth to some of it, it's like, okay, you're completely screwed because there's just so many theories and so many ways it could go. So the author claims that this sparked authorities to hide it from the general public as well as sightings of the infamous reactions to the War of the Worlds radio broadcast in 1939, which I had already spoke about. The government fear of the population not being in control of God-fearing people if God-fearing people were beginning to worship space beings.
I don't know if they'd swap that quick.
Maybe not.
Praise be to Glortha.
At this point, this is the author's speculation as to, like
He
what was going to
mitosised
happen.
into nothing for your sins.
Yeah. Now, to quote from the book, there is an even deeper anthropological implication as to why the government is so concerned and easily upset over the subject of UFOs. If a very advanced culture suddenly arrived in spaceships, large portions of the population would more than likely begin to worship the people in the spaceships as angels and believe them to be ambassadors from God.
I don't think so.
The information on UFOs thus became reserved only for people or in the power elite. The author caps the chapter off by listing his qualifications and experience in the topic of ufology. An alleged engineer who understands all aspects of radar. So in this part, he kind of
all aspects, every one of them, up, down, left, right.
Reading this, he was not a very humble man. This man.
What do you mean? Look at him. He screams. Well, never mind.
Yeah, tell me what he screams. He probably screams in a very low tone.
He looks like he could have been an extra in one of the Hills Have Eyes movies.
However, he
alternatively, do you remember Blade 2 where he's talking to that fat vampire in the subway?
I actually don't. I have not.
Is that the first one or the second? I think that's the second one. I can't remember. There's a fat vampire in the subway. I'm being very rude to this man, and I don't know why, but I think it's because of the confidence he's oozing here and the awkward social presence he's presenting in those 90s photos you're showing me.
Oh, you should. I listened to an interview he gave in like 2011, shortly before his death.
Oh, he's dead too. Maybe he is Wilford Brimley.
But I was definitely like, okay, this guy, like, never mind. We're moving on.
Okay.
So just for the sake of that. So, however he pads his resume with the equivalence of, I've heard it from a friend of a friend who works in the military. He then bridges the gap between 1 and 2 by detailing his childhood experiences. So as we move on to chapter 2, which is called Highlights of the UFO Encounters. A strange occurrence seems to be plaguing the author from a young age. A very light-skinned face with long white hair repeatedly appears to him as a child. So he starts having what sounds like visitations from some sort of being or something. However, he did not know for certain if the face seen in his doorway was an alien in origin or if it was because of the experiences that he would have later on in his life. So when he was 15 or 16, he saw his first flying saucer. Around this time, he claims that his parents let him turn their shed into his very own workstation where he would mess around with magnets, amplifiers, and all types of radios and receivers. So I am very skeptical about the man himself. However, he does seem to know his stuff about radios, frequencies, all sorts of stuff like that. Anyway, so his family... that kid who like made uranium bombs, not uranium bombs, but
the guy who gathered all the
the Boy Scout,
the smoke detectors,
and got everything.
Decided that his facial lesions weren't a problem. Lesions,
exactly. But essentially, he gets the same sort of thing where like at 15 and 16, he gets really into radios, transceivers, basically messing around with them as like a big hobby. And his parents would be like, "Go to your shed."
He's
and
the
do
father
not
from A Quiet Place.
I don't know. He's definitely from
I forgot you don't watch movies.
Nope. While tinkering in my lab one night, I couldn't get anything on the radio receivers but a strange humming noise. Suddenly, I lost all power and the lights went dark. I soon went outside and witnessed a glowing dish-shaped object about 200 feet off the ground, hovering over my front yard. The craft leaves, doing several impossible maneuvers, and takes off. His mother apparently saw it as well, noting that all the house electronics were malfunctioning before she saw the craft. Yes.
What the fuck is an impossible maneuver? Because every one of these goes an impossible maneuver.
See,
but have you seen like an F-35 do maneuvers? Or they can just sit in place and twirl. It can break dance in the air. What is an impossible maneuver? Like, does the plate warp? Does the dish serve a salad mid-flight? What's happening that's impossible? How does this 16-year-old know what's impossible for an aerial vehicle? Sorry, every one of these is like, and it did impossible maneuvers. What does that mean? What does that entail? It's so vague.
I think well, in this, they don't go into specifics of what these impossible maneuvers are. And this, I believe, is supposed to be in like the early 60s is when this happens.
Okay.
I'm guessing what the impossible maneuvers are is like when it takes off, that it like goes from one direction to the next in like a split second. And, like physically, a regular pilot doing however many G's that would probably kill them. So I'm guessing that's what it
So
was.
what about the sonic boom?
That's actually Michio Kaku and Joe Rogan were actually talking about sonic booms and how there's usually none associated with these craft going. Anyway, sorry, we're getting into the weeds with that one. But no,
like a visual representation of a UFO. It's not actually a UFO. It's just they're projecting an image to freak people. Are there UFO alien hicks sitting up there with a fancy mirror going?
Well, I can't tell you because I have no idea. And in this book, they don't really go into that, but I'm assuming, yeah. But no, it's a very classical, like, okay. And then they saw this, but anyway, this dude's mom supposedly sees it. And he says,
Mother was distraught.
Basically, she was just like more like, whoa, like everything in the house was malfunctioning, like all their radios or whatever.
I mean, it was the 60s.
Yeah.
How much could that have really been?
There was the early 60s.
The microwave was, only like 15 years old.
To be honest, no clue. Continuing, Nichols describes it as his first close encounter of the first kind. So 1 is seeing a UFO, 2 is seeing like physical beings or the fact that the craft lands. 3, I think, is supposed to be abduction or contact.
Interaction, yeah.
I think it's contact.
Direct contact or interaction.
4th is supposed to be
where you go up and you make a alien family with your new wife and her tentacle children, and you end up with a weird anthropomorphized family structure where you find out that the white picket fence is offensive. And
what?
I'm making as much sense as I'm sure the rest of this book does. So you run with my weird analogy of, like I said, this beer is a little stronger than I thought it was going to be.
Well, we're getting through this. For Mr. Nichols, this first sighting would open the floodgates for many more sightings in the future. He then mentions that around the time of his first sighting, which was, as I said, the early 60s or the early 1960s.
We have a picture of Mr. Preston Nichols in the 60s.
No.
Did he look particularly alien prone?
Well, that's what's really interesting, that it's like, why him and why, other than the fact that he was messing around with these radio frequencies and whatever, is really the only connection that I have personally seen. This happened near Islip, Long Island. That's where apparently he's located. In high school, a large group of students, also with him in tow, saw a large boomerang-style craft over their school's ball field. That would be his second time seeing this, and this is also during his time in Long Island, New York, which is interesting. There was an incident, I think, during the 70s where there was something called the Hudson boomerang, which people saw over the course of a few years or months around there. I don't think this is the same incident as described then, but as his schooling progressed and he attended the Suffolk Community College in Selden, he claimed that the sightings became a regular occurrence. And being a student of the electrical technology department, he began setting up radios, cameras, and other gadgets to document these experiences. So basically, as an extracurricular activity and his interest in this subject, he started trying to do experiments to prove or capture or record something regarding this UFO phenomenon. However, despite capturing such events, he would later return to find his findings had been taken, as a fellow student allegedly reported on what they had done to somebody.
What was he doing?
Well, that's the thing. What it sounds like is he was doing just like experiments to capture, UFO, being like on the radio. He noticed they came in at a certain radio frequency. Why would a student be
concerned? Was he like,
I think that
doing inappropriate things in the office while he was trying?
It's kind of like, oh, the government's trying to shut it down. Like he says that they captured some stuff, some radio frequencies, and supposedly caught, because he was able, he claimed in the book that he's able to track. This was in the Suffolk Suffolk.
Suffolk County.
Yeah. Well, community college in Selden, which I'm guessing is New York. He's on the East Coast.
Okay, so like the FBI's out here trying to catch like a mobster, and then on the other end they hear, "Do you have it, Alex?" And they're like, "Yeah, somebody go get that fucker real quick."
Yeah, he's like, hold on, what are you got? He done this with a couple other students in his electric, in his like department, I guess. And one of them is supposedly told, and somebody came and kind of got rid of all the evidence that Hay had found. So very, very classic, right? Am I right?
Very convenient.
Yes, yes. See, Austin, we don't have to disagree on everything.
Just most things to preserve our rivalry.
Even with the setbacks, Nichols continued and gained the ability to recognize the electromagnetic and radio frequencies that these craft would make. But it wasn't until 1974 that he would see another craft. And now we move
Starting
on
to sound kind of like, remember that Voyager's book I'm still struggling through?
No, remind me. Is that the one that's based off of
That's the one by
Humanity?
Ashayana Dion or whatever, where that lady who the Angelic Humanity Instagram page, that gal. I'm nearly halfway through the first book now, and it's still ever increasingly painful.
You should do one of these TLDRs for that. That would be insane. And I think
it is insane. Every page is insane. That will be a 60-parter because I can get 4 pages in and we'll be like, okay, we have enough lore. We could write a Tolkien book. So let me break this down real quick.
What's that theory where they're like, the simplest answer is probably the right one?
I think it's Occam's razor, right?
Maybe. Yeah. Like, so it's like, okay, it's this, the simplest theory is probably the correct one. Then you go into this thing where it's just like, oh, these beings have been fighting this existential war for hundreds of billions of years or whatever it is. And your daily life has virtually no fucking point to it other than what these beings are trying to accomplish.
Dude, I just opened the book again. All right. Chapter 4. This is one section of chapter 4. You ready?
Yeah.
Holographic inserts and matrix transplantation.
That's just, yeah. What does that mean?
I got to get past the tree of life and the Zeta conspiracy before I get to that portion. Oh, no, not frequency fences.
Is this Zeta Reticuli?
Let's see. The Zeta planet destruction, all within the time matrix grid, is unconnected. And when a planet or galaxy is blown off the grid, a hole is left within the grid fabric. The hole affects everything within the area of activity surrounding the hole. As energy flowing around the broken grid lines hits blank spots or breaks in the pattern, the grid lines within the time matrix represent time continua or passageways of linear time sequencing. When energy approaches the hole of the fabric of the time matrix, it is magnetically pulled into the hole. Once it enters the hole, the time sequence organization that is originally carried as part of the time matrix becomes scrambled, and energy is no longer able to re-enter the time matrix from the position in which the first entered the hole.
Okay, so all I hear
I'm not seeing much about Zeta.
Yeah, time is.
This is why I've made it like halfway through this book in the past 2.5 years.
They're saying the same thing 4 different ways from 5 different directions.
The introduction is about her goddamn life, and I still feel like it's that. Anywho, continue with this far more sane, crazy man.
Where were we? So we left him during his like college days when he's like 20. He's learning how to track these.
He's learning about his body.
UFOs. Does he look like he learned much about his body?
No, it doesn't. Who's the person on the far right? Can you green screen me the person on my far right? Sorry. Oh, okay. I thought he had like a weird, wacky 90s ponytail because it kind of looked like.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's just the backdrop. I'm guessing that's at some sort of like conference or UFO thing because he is. I'll have to look into him more, but it looks like he's very popular on that circuit.
Imagine, yeah.
Fast forward to the mid 1970s. Our hero is working for a Long Island defense contractor. Our hero. Preston B Nichols.
Preston Nichols.
During his time there, he was approached by his superior, along with several others, to check out what he called foreign technology. He names a place called BMJ or BJM. I don't know what that is, but it's some Long Island defense contractor.
Buff man jerking it.
That's as good a name as any.
My favorite defense contractor.
And now he's being approached by a superior in this company to take a look at some foreign technology. And this wasn't a voluntary assignment. So already, something's going down. They were ushered onto a plane and then to a hangar where they were then transferred to a bus. And okay, so
If I knew any Usher songs, I would have started singing them real quick, but I don't.
but yeah, so they were literally ushered onto a bus, transferred, driven around. Basically, it was to make them not know where they had flown. But Preston B Nichols, our hero, deduces that they were probably in Ohio.
Finally, yes, the most common of road formations, the Ohioan Standard.
There's a lot of lore, especially UFO lore, around Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay, well, I mean, it's almost like aircraft leave Air Force bases or something and make it far more likely that people would be like, what's in the sky? Keep going. Sorry.
They're all confuzzled. They've been driven around in a bus and a bunch of planes and going around. Back to the book. Oh, no, not back to the book. Finally, the group was led through another corridor into a hangar containing a disc-shaped craft. To the book, I looked at one of the Air Force personnel and said, "Hey, that's UFO." The airman said, "Shh, we're not supposed to say things like that. It's a foreign aircraft."
And a UFO. And the Air Force man went like, "It's fucking here. It's not unidentified, you idiot."
So the officer and company were then allowed to check out this foreign aircraft. They began to inspect the disc. From the outside, this is quoted from the book, the craft was silver and looked like a typical disc shape. It appeared to be 50 feet in diameter and 20 feet in height. There was a dome atop of it that was about 15 feet wide with 3 legs that it was standing on, with a ramp that went up from the ground to a doorway at the edge of the craft.
Literally the most stereotypical UFO you could imagine.
Yes. So it has little pencil legs, I'm assuming, those 3 like tripod-y dudes. And then it literally, from the side of the craft, there's supposedly an opening with a ramp down.
The fucking Flight of the Navigator had a more creative UFO.
What is that? The Flight of the Navigator?
Yeah, I forgot you don't watch movies. It's a very good kids movie. We'll watch it sometime. It's sweet. He makes friends with a weird 3-legged little animal and the robot inside, and the robot computer goes, "Ah ha ha ha." When he learns what comedy is, it's funny.
Well, that's good. The outside looks very stereotypical UFO, but now we're going to get to the inside, which is far stranger. And this is the part. No, get ready to roll your eyes, Austin. Take another swig of that beer because you're going to need it.
Trust me, I've taken plenty of swigs. If I roll my eyes too much harder, we'll have to pick them up later, and I'll have to call you up from down south there.
Nichols goes on to describe how visually the inside of the spacecraft did not match the outside. To the book, the vessel was only 50 feet in diameter, yet as we walked in one direction for what seemed like to be 10 minutes, there was literally hundreds or thousands of feet of space. I couldn't explain it at the time. The explanation they were to discover was that the ship, at least the inside, had an artificial reality to it.
Oh, what a simple solution.
They go into some explanation, but let me continue here. The interior showed no
picture
sign.
Of him real quick again and go like, you think this man could walk 1,000 meter? Yeah, you think that man's walking 1,000 feet?
Hey, he's a young man at this point. He probably pre all the crab cakes. God, that's so bad. So basically what's going on is it's kind of like the Mary Poppins bag, right?
Or the tent from Harry Potter 4.
Or the tent from Harry Potter 4. They walk in.
Or a bag of holding from D&D circa 1982.
Hey, dude. Yeah, well, who knows? The interior showed no knobs or buttons of any kind, and the lighting on the inside of the craft would turn on and off as they navigated. They would walk along, and then
so it had the fancy technology of a frozen food aisle.
Pretty much that's what was going on. So they were like walking around. There was like no panels or anything. It was basically.
So hear me out. As you read more and more like alien books that get closer and closer to the modern age, let me know if the technology of the alien crafts gets significantly more advanced as human technology is caught up to the marvels that were previously.
Where they're like, then they had iPads built into the side, or what appeared to be iPads, or like, shit like that, you mean?
Floating screens in the air they could interact with their eyes, which is like right at the edge of what we can do now,
Yeah, well, we'll find out because here we go. The Air Force also informed the group of scientists that the inside had also had an odd atmosphere when they first recovered it. I don't know what the odd atmosphere was, but when they recovered, I don't know
So
if that
it
was like for
managed,
the
so this
beings.
alternate reality inside of the ship
Hmm.
normalized atmospheres with the Earth and atmosphere, despite its expanding size and its separate reality.
Yes.
Neat.
So anyway, so they're walking along inside of this craft, and there's no panels or knobs or anything that like really discerns like
It's a very
anything.
60s kind of thing. No panels or knobs.
Finally, they entered a control room consisting of 3 reclined lounge-like seats, which contained coils and wires and other
Time to
items.
jack in, baby.
Apparently, these were some type of like haptic feedback chairs.
Oh shit, they were playing FPSs with fucking force feedback.
So
These guys were Call of Duty pros.
yeah, so they walk into this room, and there's 3, like 1, 2, 3 chairs that were these haptic feedback chair type things. And 4 screens lined the front walls, which were also psychic or otherwise connected to the pilot's thought process.
Psychic.
Mhm. Allowing them to call up maps or images at will to the screens. The screens were powered from a room behind them by a huge cluster of crystal rocks.
That's my favorite kind of power source. Fuck off. I was kind of here for the rest of it. And now I'm like, you're
I
getting
knew you
power
would
from
lose at the
rocks.
minute I
Fuck
said
off.
you don't even okay. Coils spiraled around the crystals, which were connected at various points by wiring. There were no windows here or in any other portion of the craft. The crew then moved up a level to the ship's living quarters. It goes along with creature comforts. The upper decks had laboratories and
Creature
a
comforts.
large, yeah,
They didn't
like
have any knobs, but they got knobs for creature comforts. Like,
not
what up?
knobs. I don't know what that means. It literally just said like creature comfort. So I'm guessing like,
Creature comforts.
yeah.
That makes me think of like water dispensers, blankets, things to help you carry yourself. Wink,
Mhm.
wink. Bathrooms,
I mean,
toothbrushes, instant ramen.
so yeah, that's where it's kind of like, okay, what is in here? It also, the upper deck had a laboratory station and a large medical bay, which Nichols surmised
So he determined the two divisions between those two.
well, no,
The alien chemistry was different enough between med bay and chemical bay that he could tell as someone who was like, there's no knobs or buttons.
yeah, I don't know. It's apparently, he never described like what was in the spots. He just said it was like, oh, there's a laboratory. And then he
I
also
just
said that there
noticed the
was like,
text they wrote his name and his buddy's name on the book with, and I'm kind of giggling.
oh, yeah,
Yeah, look at
and
that.
Peter Moon as well.
Classy. Keep going.
Um,
I'm so sorry. I keep getting just like,
but so Nichols assumed that the medical bay was in where they did experiments on humans. So he's subscribing to the fact that aliens are abducting people and spooky shit
much
like
more
that.
likely than when they get rid of alien venereal disease.
So finally, they reached the bottom level, which had one big room filled with different clusters of rocks, neatly wired together with gold, silver, and platinum.
Wait, okay. Okay. Hear me out. I'm gonna get some, okay? And I'm gonna show you a wire of platinum and a wire of silver. I want you to tell the difference to me without touching them or testing them.
All right.
You're not gonna be able to. That is such a fucking like that is a leap, man.
Yeah,
that
well,
is such a leap.
These guys are scientists, so
Plus
perhaps
to have pure platinum, pure like I know people who are advanced in general metallurgy, so like their whole shtick is manipulations of metals in minerals, and they're like, yeah, no, they look a lot alike until you look at them either under some sort of light alteration or you actually test the physicality of them. If you're just looking at them, it's really hard to tell them apart because they both have similar luster and they're both similar color.
Exactly. I understand though too, because I just went to like a ring shop a few weeks ago and it was like, this is white gold and this is silver and this is gold and this is
white gold,
and this
platinum,
is platinum,
silver, all of that shit looks the exact same.
Yeah.
You know what else looks the exact same? Molybdenum.
Oh, they could have had a whole thing full of molybdenum. But here, listen to this. So around the rock room were 4 other rooms which connected 4 hemispherical pods, which appeared to contain an assortment of antennas. The entire bottom section was also surrounded by a huge coil.
1 moment, please hold. Appeared to contain an assortment of antennas. So he's like, I don't know if those were antennas, but I know that was gold, silver, and platinum.
this is the thing.
Keep going, keep
The
going,
way
keep
he
going.
describes certain things, it's like he leaves out a lot of like, you're like, oh, I would like to learn more. And then he doesn't really go into the detail about that. But so, okay, so the assortment antennas, the entire bottom section was also surrounded by a huge coil, noted by the author to resemble a degassing coil used in TV sets.
Oh my
Again,
God.
what you were saying, where it was like, we kind of are like,
How it's
they're
related to the
recognizing
technology of
technology.
the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Because like I've heard other people describing basically like, yeah, like what they think the inside of a UFO or like stuff like this. And it's similar to this, but it also sometimes it's like honeycombed or it's just, there's too many things that I'm like, okay, how many different ways can you make one of these? Preston concluded that the ship drive must be based on electromagnetic principles. After the tour, the group were given time to conduct experiments. During this, the crew would measure readings from the ship. It was turned on and levitated 10 to 20 feet up for them so that they could go under it and do other tests and such.
Didn't have legs though.
Well, it was turned on and like activated, and so it was floating
So
instead of
how off the ground was it with legs?
5
Inconveniently
feet.
high.
I wish I knew. I swear, I wish I knew that.
No, I just have to ask these questions.
Yeah.
That's my point here.
Well, they're very potent questions, because that was one thing that I did discern through the book. Was I was like, okay, a lot of the time he goes, and then they just whisked us off and like didn't like vet us really. They were just like, we need you to check out some foreign technology.
I mean, it was the 70s or 80s or whatever.
Yeah, it was
9/11
1970.
hadn't happened yet. You didn't have to check if the sole of your shoe had a bomb in it.
Yeah, this was 1974.
You could bring a cigar and a bomb on the plane as long as it didn't go off on the plane.
Nichols then says how the team believed that the craft, so after they had done all that stuff, Nichols and the team believed that the craft possessed a type of reality engineering system.
Well, that seems pretty, that's like some end game shit. That's some, hey, water to wine, wood to flesh, whatever.
Yeah, you're like,
reality engineering, baby.
A little bit of alchemy.
Yeah, that's the end point of alchemy, where you're like, well, I have these atoms. I'd like them to be these atoms, though.
So, as described in the book, if reality is defined as an agreed upon system of perception and interaction that conforms to certain rules, reality engineering refers to the changing of that system. Or more importantly, it refers to creating a different system that can interface with the original system or reality.
Okay, they're actually talking about stuff that I think would be cool. Imagine, so we have VR, right?
Yeah.
This is my peak of reality engineering that I think humans can manage. Think of if you could change the way a human's perceiving something within an area. So each step they take is a half step. They're perceiving they're taking a full step, but what they're actually doing is taking a half step. And you make an area in a smaller area that contains more things than it doesn't. It wouldn't work for physical. I couldn't imagine you could make something that is physically, like you couldn't take something you have while in this state and store it physically in this area.
Yeah.
But you could put, once we get to the point where we have equally complex computers, etc., in a virtual space, you could have it so that a half step is worth 10 steps,
Yeah, so
but you're making the mind perceive it's doing a full step,
elongating it,
and you could extend, you could make a gigantic virtual area for operations and interaction. So I hate the idea of a virtual workspace, but I feel like the future on, if we ever do achieve space travel, is a virtual workspace.
Yeah.
So we can have smallest possible area, but have everyone locked into a virtual state where they're imagining a vastly larger virtual area. So by having someone take a half step, but making them perceive it as a full step in a world where 10 steps is equivalent to twice the width of the actual vehicle they're in,
Yeah. Now, do you think that would be achievable by tying a bunch of platinum and gold and wires around stuff? And
I genuinely think it would be by having such, it wouldn't even be full VR. It would be a virtual impact. So the mind itself would have to be in the virtual state, not the person, because the person would still be able to move. So it'd have to be somehow confusing the person into moving with half steps through a virtual world where half steps equal 10 normal steps or something, you know? So
I see what you're saying.
everyone's doing tiny little shuffles through this ship, but it looks like it's a much bigger thing. And it'd
Mhm.
have to be immersive as hell. So it would need to be just the space that is altered, not people. So it would have to translate where you are positionally to that expanse.
Yeah.
And the layout would have to be made so it fit that expanded virtual area. But I feel like that would be perfect. You could have a tiny little tube that's moving at near light speed, traveling to another planet, but its layout is in such a way that when expanded to a 10 step per half step space, everyone thinks they're in the right orientation and everyone is crowded or covered by the same orientation in that physical space. I feel like there's a
Yeah.
lot of logarithmic things we could do with VR that aren't being done yet that will be done and will
Yeah.
facilitate a lot more human expansion, that sort of thing.
Which, makes a lot of sense. And it's funny though, because I wasn't expecting you to be more, yeah, not accepting, but more, open to that sort of idea of this, like,
Him saying it's
okay,
a
he's able
separate
to,
reality is wacky, but him saying it's a virtualized reality, like they're walking
yeah.
into that ship and maybe they've got a technology where instead of having to put on goggles and hold shit in your hands, it
Yeah.
takes you, it takes the frame of you, the size of you, and applies it to this virtual reality that's already operating in the ship. It's
Mhm.
actually 50 diameter
By,
space,
yeah.
but when they're inside of it, unbeknownst to them, they're half stepping or shuffling or something instead of actually taking steps. So it feels wider.
We go back to that reality thing. So in Preston B Nichols's estimation, this is how the ship's systems operated. One, a single system was activated and controlled by the beings in the haptic feedback seats. Two, the thoughts of all from the chairs were channeled into the cluster of crystals that was behind the view screens and
Oh yeah,
basically,
crystal's great for
yeah,
holding thoughts.
yeah. So this was basically like a computer. Well, the crystals below was the reality generator. So the ones behind the screen connected to their visual stuff and like their systems, and then everything below that was the reality engineering. After the
Okay.
crew concluded their investigations, they were all returned to their normal jobs. No one discussed it afterwards as instructed by their superiors. So their superiors were like, don't be talking about this.
Shut fuck up.
Mm-hmm. After a time of not being able to contain himself, uh, Preston B. Nichols basically
It's
brought it
really
up to one
starting to
of
sound
his,
like he was jizzing on his radio equipment and then his student friend told on him. And then he ended up here and he was like, oh, geez, aliens. And then he got kicked out again.
I mean, it does kind of seem that way because like after a time,
Sometimes it happens, man, but you got to hold off if you're about to reveal government secrets, you know?
because he was like, I have to ask, even so he went to go ask one of his like people about it that had been there. And apparently they claimed that they didn't remember anything. And even he was having issues recalling the event. What it kind of seems
His
like,
implication is they
yes.
used the fucking zapper from Men in Black
Yeah,
on him.
they did some sort of thing because he goes in some of the next couple chapters where they talk about being debriefed and how, I'll go into that when we get to it.
Did he close his eyes like a rebel?
So to the book, when I did finally ask my colleagues, they had no recollection. At the same time, I was having memory problems of my own. I was living a buried life that I didn't have full recognition until years later. So during his time in this other life, he claims that he helped disassemble a similar UFO to the one he had witnessed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This took place when he was looking at Brookhaven Labs and on the Montauk project, a project that will be discussed later in detail at some point, because that's the big book and the really notable project that people apparently care about. I don't know how much how much I give credence to that. The craft he helped take apart was more ovular and had knobs and buttons. The body was able to be broken apart into segments, which Nichols stated was similar to reports that have circulated about the gray alien spacecraft. Nichols closes the chapter by saying he felt the craft he
What
saw at Wright
reports?
Patterson. That's again, very vague reports. And I know some stuff about the gray aliens or like the theories about that, but I've never really heard the, what their supposed craft were like or like how it all works. But anyway, so he closes the chapter by saying he felt the craft he saw at Wright-Patterson Air Force was the high quality ship, or was the highest quality ship in his opinion. So the first one that he saw was the sport model, so to speak.
So those were the bourgeoisie. They crashed their Rolls while the other guys crashed their Civic.
Crashed, I don't know about, like, I mean, he's talking about the fact that all these things crashed. I don't have any
No 1960s plane is taking down a UFO.
well,
No
see,
modern planes taking down anything that can interspace travel.
yeah, well, you'll see what goes on in the next chapter, because that's the one where we kind of get into what's going on, why they might be crashing, and so to speak.
You haven't read the book Old Man's War, right?
No.
Highly suggested. It's pretty good.
Put a reading list together for me, just like
I'll
Dune.
put together, dude. I'll put together a sci-fi reading list. I love it. I need more people who listen or read to sci-fi or listen. They have audiobooks. Listen to sci-fi, because Sean doesn't. None of the other people I know who read books read sci-fi. They're all into fantasy, and fantasy's fine. But
Yeah,
like I was telling you, you're the only guy who's read Dune. I can't
centaurs.
convince anyone else to do it.
See, that's the weirdest thing, that apparently Dune, or like I'm the one who read Dune.
Dune is sci-fantasy. That's what kills me. Like there's a lot of sci-fi I read that is pure sci-fi. Dune is sci-fantasy.
Yeah, you do. Now that you say that it's fantasy, I'm kind of like, yeah, you do. I do see that a little bit more, just because they're like, all right, here's the different like races, and this is like, like the Fremen versus like Atreides, and the Harkonnens are completely like almost separate people now.
Yeah.
Even though they're all the same race or whatever. Or is that the case? I don't actually know.
Yeah, they're all humans, but they've been living on their own planets for so many generations. They've changed. Like House Carino, the Empire's house, that's a whole different thing. And even though they were written by Brian Herbert, not Frank Herbert, and they kind of suck, they're still interesting. They bring up good points despite being written like trash, Sorry, tangented. Anyway, Tell me about Herbert Nichols.
So now we go to chapter 4. Preston brings us next to his next encounter of a flying saucer. Shortly before he was, quote, terminated from his job at BJM Company, they had been hired to build a specific UHF transmitter. He happened to preface this obviously with the fact that he was fired from the BJM at the shortly after this, but
the buff jerkin men.
To the book. As I had a reputation for putting together technology for spook projects, meaning, underground black projects for the government, they decided to turn the job over to me. He got in contact with an individual who wanted a pulse modulating transmitter. The specifics on this transmitter needed to be able to transmit to a highly specific radio frequency, which Nichols claims is still classified to this day.
There's only so many of those,
Yeah, he collected components from BJM. So basically he started scrounging together pieces of like equipment to make this highly specific radio frequency transmitter. After arriving, he was instructed to set up. So now he's, I skipped over some stuff. So he could, once the device was complete, he was instructed to take it to Fort Meade, Maryland. So not randomly, but it's all finished and everything. And they're like, all right, we need you to ship it off to this spot. So
off you go, buddy. And they slapped him on his butt.
Yeah, basically. And then they send him on his way with a couple of other people escorting him. So once the device was, after arriving, he was instructed to set the device up near a hangar where 2 men from the government were, one with a 2-way radio. The one with the radio commenced to tell the person on the other end that they were ready. So he turns on this radio transceiver. These 2 guys out by this Air Force hangar basically are communicating with somebody that they're ready to start some sort of thing.
Have you read 3 Body Problem yet?
No, that's another one I need to read.
Yeah, Joseph Rogan talks about that all the time.
Yeah, he does. How do you know?
Because it's a good sci-fi series, and I've already read the first 3, and I'm starting the 4th one. How do you know
that Joe Rogan said it?
Because you told me after I asked if you'd read it the first time.
Oh yeah, well he does talk about it. So To the book, a small flying saucer approached until it was right in front of us. As soon as it had reached us, it began to hum and turn about. After being so instructed, I turned the transmitter on, and the saucer became unstable. It began to wobble and whine and make strange noises. One of the men then said, "Shut it off. It works." Months after the event back at BMJ, sorry, he heard rumors that
Buffman Jerkin, I know.
he heard that the rumors that their satellite division at this place that he was working on new technology. Preston said in the book that he had heard that they were using this technology on the satellites to track the UFOs coming and going. And he speculated that it was his type of, it was his radio transmitter that they were using. This was claimed by the author to have been during the beginnings of the Reagan STI project. He lists a specific date of September 25th, 1989, and says that he was told to take this transmitter.
You sure he didn't mean Reagan's STD program regarding AIDS?
Definitely definitely Star Wars, not.
Oh, okay.
Star. TVs.
This is so dumb. Forever, when I think of Star Wars, I have this VH1 quote from, I think, Michael Ian Black saying, yeah, they were going to reflect a laser. They're going to shoot it out of Washington off of a satellite, off of a few celebrities' cleavage, back into space, and then into a communist missile. And I was very ready for that program.
See, that sounds way intense because anyway, so sorry. So now it's September 25th. September 25th, 1989. And he says that he was told to take his transmitter to William Floyd Parkway and that people would be waiting for him. He took that transmitter and he was escorted to a specific location where a large van with a radio dish and a large refrigerator-like structure were near the water.
Refrigerator-like structure?
Yeah. Basically, there's.
The fuck is that?
It was just a big refrigerator-like thing and a truck with a big radio dish on top of it.
Okay.
It was
peak technology. Gotcha.
Yep. Near the water was a 400 hertz generator that was up and running. With the order to set up his transmitter, Nichols turned it on, and a blue glow began emanating from the dish on the whatever the heck that stupid dish thing was. The glow reflected towards the sky. So approximately a half hour later, him and the men nearby the water could hear the sound of helicopter rotors going over the water, kind of close to where they were. Okay. As the helicopters came into view over Moriches Bay, which is apparently where they were, the author says that he saw a couple of big lights in the sky. Accompanied by these big lights were these choppers, and they were like apparently circling the lights. So at that time, one of the military personnel that was on the shore with them pointed a high-powered spotlight to the sky, revealing a large, quote, wedge-shaped craft. Wedge-shaped craft.
Oh, it's a web. It's Spooderman.
This triangular UFO was an estimated 300 feet across. As it got closer to the transmitter and the dish, it began to wobble and hum along with the equipment. After letting out a high-pitched whine, it crashed into the water. Quote, no sooner had the UFO crash landed than the men in the area in the van yelled out that the operation was finished. They wanted us to leave the area as soon as possible.
We can't leave the atmosphere, but we sure can critically affect an inner space traveling ships control systems with AM, FM.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, this is the thing. I feel like, okay, so this is going to certain speculation that anytime you see, like, I feel like I'm getting in the weeds here, but that there's certain, it's like, which ones do you think are man-made craft and which ones do you think are actually like extraterrestrial drones, extraterrestrials themselves or whatever? I'm feeling that most of the time when people are talking about like wedge-shaped craft or like boomerangs or anything that kind of like has wings of a sort, that those are going to be like classified military projects. What I think he was witnessing right there was them trying to make their own version of a UFO and then testing the capability of whatever this transmitter.
And then watching it pull a dramatic crash down.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's like, how are they gonna, because one of the things was in the book he was talking about how they were like, okay, we need you to get down there at 10 o'clock, we're gonna need you to show up at this place. And then he sets it up at 10:30, and that 11 or 11:15 is when, pretty much like on schedule, like on a timeline, all these things are happening like it was an experiment. And I really don't think that these guys could just be like, all right, and then at 11:15, we'll catch one of those UFOs, we'll circle it near the water, and then we'll get it to crash, hopefully, because this guy's going to, hit it with his thing. So I'm guessing that if this actually did happen, it was the military made its own craft, and that's why they were like, okay, I guess that works. Because he also, before this, had gone to a spot and like used it on a smaller actual flying saucer that they saw, So I'm wondering if that one was just like an actual test, because that was at an actual Air Force base. This is out somewhere on like the water of near Fort Meade or whatever he said it was. Sorry, at near Mauritius Bay, whatever that is. Oh yeah, this is the part that's going to really get your goat.
Oh God.
So after returning home and being tailed by agents, Nichols' house was put under surveillance. His phone lines were mysteriously dead, and he could not reach his associates, who also were present that night. To the book. The following day, I went to work and was followed by agents again. I was immediately put through a debriefing procedure and told to forget everything. So remember when I told you back where he was like, oh, I was having trouble remembering stuff. Yeah, so he was told through a debriefing project, to forget everything he saw regarding the UFO incident. By this point, I had already learned how to counter their debriefing procedure. That's why I still remembered this incident, and the other employees from my company don't remember anything at all. So,
can you put the book up in front of his face real quick?
Yeah.
That man right there is resistant to all of the government's abilities.
Yeah, so he was so smart, or so he figured out how to remember after they told him not to.
He stores that extra brain in that chin.
I have here a side note. Nichols says that this incident is somehow famous and is known as the Mauritius Bay UFO crash, and it is well known in the UFO community and in Long Island. I don't know the validity of that, but maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We'll see how that goes. Because I don't think I've ever heard of the Mauritius Bay, and I haven't looked into it yet, but like I know a lot about UFO stuff, and I haven't heard anything about that. So the experiment Preston took part in made him certain that Reagan's Star Wars initiative was not designed for the Russians, but for alien technology from space.
Okay.
So basically he's saying that they were looking to track and possibly shoot down alien UFOs instead of like Russian missiles or whatever, or Soviet missiles, I should say. From this point on, the author dove deeper into the UFO community and became the science consultant to the Long Island UFO Network. He kept his focus and research on UFO technology, including the alternate reality aspects of the craft.
Oh, yes, the good old alternate reality.
Yes.
That's the one that keeps getting me.
That is as far as we're going to get here for today. But as you see, chapters 1 through 4 were highly informative as to what Preston B Nichols is all about. And
that's exactly what I was
going
to say. Preston Nichols is definitely not making any of it up.
See, and the thing is that I feel bad because part of it is like, I know it seems super freaking wacky, and like, especially he comes off quite arrogant in the book a little bit, just as being like, they knew that I was the best at doing radio stuff. And like, the thing is that he obviously, like, in the book, whenever he gets technical about stuff, he starts talking, it's always about the radio stuff. So I'm like, he definitely has that knowledge. But especially like just him in general and like how he seems to act, he's like, man, I just kind of was like, oh my goodness, it's a UFO. And like, I knew how to deflect their Men in Black memory wipe device kind of thing. Okay, like what the heck, like it just comes off pretty arrogant. And so, have you ever heard of Nick Cook? Or I believe that's his name.
I feel like that's a name you may have mentioned to me before.
Yeah, let me just read off his he's a British journalist, but in essence, he was he was a former aviations journalist, and he was really involved in talking to like people about, like he was a part of the Skoda works and the skunk works from Lockheed.
Okay.
And I actually listened to a interview podcast with him, and he was talking how he never, because he's interested in mostly like advanced physics and propulsion, right? And since he was doing all this journalistic stuff, he was kind of involved with these, higher ups in like the skunk works and like classified technology departments in these aerospace companies. And he had to be very careful what he said and how he asked certain questions. Like he could kind of poke and prod and like find out, he's like, oh, what are the breakthrough technologies that we've got in like, propulsion or whatever. But he was never like, hey, do we have any alien spacecraft that could break our, understanding of physics and reality, And Preston B Nichols is kind of on the other coin of that, because all these guys trusted Nick Cook, up to a point until he started like publishing certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But he was able to like stay in that realm and become pretty good friends with most people in the like, the skunk works and things like that, and gaining all this kind of knowledge by not pressing too hard about UFOs or anything that would kind of label him as like kooky or crazy, or maybe he's trying to overstep his bounds and get these guys in trouble or something. Whereas Mr. Preston B Nichols kind of seems like he's like, I was too smart and I'm the bad boy. I'm the one who they needed to call when
I looked at him, I knew he was a bad boy. I looked at that man and went, he rides a Harley. Look at that.
Yeah. But so yeah, exactly.
He looks like a fucking professor at Hogwarts, man.
I mean, yeah, he does kind of, now that you say that. I don't know, just comparing like Nick Cook to that guy, and just like it kind of, that's why I feel a bit more skeptical about what he's claiming here in the Pleiades. But the best part is we're not even close to him actually being abducted.
I was about to say he hasn't even been to the Pleiades yet.
No, he hasn't been instructed and educated on how his health and his mental being and what have you. You know what I'm saying? We still, so much is to
I
be
do
gained
understand how strange that all sounds.
Can you believe that I don't even fully subscribe to this?
No, in fact.
So we're going to be coming back at you in a few weeks here with the next installment of
part 2
of Encounters in the Pleiades
with Preston Nichols and the Koala of Time.
That's Austin's favorite part. It's just the koala. It's like, that's all.
Why is there a koala on the front? They're not the most alien creature we have.
What I'm guessing is that when he goes to the Pleiades, they're like, we've basically Noah's arked all of Earth because we love Earth so much and you guys are destroying it and we need you to stop that, sort of thing. I'm guessing that's what it's about, because then there's also like all these plants and flowers and stuff. There's a butterfly up in that corner.
No, there's a koala, there's a butterfly, there's a Beyblade. I'm ready, man.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be a UFO, but all right.
Well, Godspeed, paranormal audience. It has been Patrick and Austin here with another exciting adventure into Preston Nichols' history of aliens. We've got at least 3 more of these. We'll see how many more. I don't know. Maybe 12, maybe 65. That's a fairly thick book.